Hello, I'm Gianmaria, Griglio, a conductor and a composer, and welcome to a new episode of Conducting Pills, a series where we take a repertoire piece or a part of it and we analyze it from a conductor's point of view. In this episode, we'll tackle the first movement of Schumann's Third Symphony, its structure, its phrasing, and of course some technical tips. As usual, you can jump through different sections of the video by clicking on the links present in the description below. And now, let's begin! Around the time he was in Düsseldorf for his new conducting position, Schumann gave birth to one of his most popular works. Being in A-flat major with a beginning in a 3/4 meter, this symphony immediately calls for a comparison with the titan of the music, Beethoven, with his Third Symphony. Quite a common and obvious fact, every composer of the 1800s measured himself up to Beethoven when it came to symphonic music, from Schubert to Schumann to Brahms to Mahler. Some, like Brahms and Schubert, often second-guessed themselves. Brahms took 17 years to write his First Symphony. Schumann, on the other hand, took the bull by the horns and wrote his symphony in roughly 5 weeks between November and December of 1850. The symphony premiered on February 6, 1851 in Düsseldorf, conducted by Schumann himself, and got some mixed reviews, ranging from praise without qualification to bewilderment. However, according to Peter Brown, members of the audience applauded between each movement, and especially at the end of the work when the orchestra joined them in congratulating Schumann by shouting "Hooray!". Schumann's Third Symphony consists of 5 movements, departing from the usual 4, so quite an unusual choice for the time. But then again, Beethoven had done that already with his Sixth Symphony. And yet, Schumann manages to create something new. New colors, new orchestration, new conception of the overall structure. The first movement is vibrant and carries a sense of grandeur and a somewhat optimistic approach to life. The first theme is clearly conceived for an orchestral canvas and apt to a large symphonic painting. And even though this theme sounds optimistic, it is veiled by melancholic shadows. It is Schumann's ability to affirm something and doubt it at the same time. As a matter of fact, the theme keeps going, flowing in and out of rhythmic ambiguities, which make the music sound sometimes in 2, sometimes in 3, all within a 4-bar phrase structure. It's of course a composing trick that speeds up or slows down the idea and the perception of tempo. It's a composing trick that Schumann did not invent, but used here brilliantly in this context to propel forward the driving energy of his musical idea. Try to follow the natural accents of the inner phrasing, making your strokes more prominent every other bar for the first 6 bars. After that, you'll have to change your stroke in order to accommodate the inner rhythm, making sure that you pulse on the downbeat rest or slurred notes of the first violins. There is another characteristic of this theme, the interval of 4. And here, and here. And as I mentioned earlier, the use of this interval is a common denominator for the entire Third Symphony. And notice how the 2 notes that begin the phrase change their function when they close it. The third key point of this first theme is in a bass line. Schumann mounts diatonic melody on top of a chromatic scale. And the theme ends with a small coda, which will be reused later in the movement. And make sure that the space between the inner beats is even and you don't actually go up and then stop and have to wait to make up for it. And pulse on the downbeat of the bars that begin with the slurred note. Moving on, Schumann repeats the theme again, this time with the horns taking the lead. But notice how it almost sounds like they're displaced, forming a sort of canon with the rest of the orchestra. Less heroic and more melancholic is the second theme, which again begins with a descending fourth, first introduced by the woodwinds, then the strings. The shadows do not last long, however, as the second theme cannot fight the power of the first theme, and the urgency intrinsic in the first theme bursts in rapidly, led by a trumpet call. This whole movement is written in sonata form, by the way. A first theme followed by a contrasting second theme forming the two big blocks of the exposition, followed by a development, followed by a recapitulation, followed by a coda. What Schumann does, though, is to use the material in constantly evolving ways. The first theme morphs from heroic into a darker mood, and sometimes it is used simply as connecting tissue. And even the second theme could be seen as a metamorphosis of the first theme, sort of a shyer version of it, mashed by the disruptive power of the first theme itself. I like to think about them as two different aspects of the same personality, like Florestan and Eusebius. The development is a masterclass in composition, 8 full minutes of a constant flow of ideas and elaborations. The trumpets open with a theatrical call for attention. Then we hear the musical material from the coda of the first theme. And then the musical material of the second theme, followed by this idea, which, by the way, will come back at the end of the fourth movement. And as optimistic and heroic as the first theme sounds in the exposition, in the development it becomes at times dark, at times uncertain, going through different transformation, trying to find its way back to its original emotional aspect. Check the balance 8 bars before letter H. Horns, trumpets and timpani can easily overpower everyone else throughout this long crescendo. And then there is a surprise moment. Everyone backs off to a pianissimo while the horns gloriously play a variation of the first theme in a forte marcato with dropped accents indicating even more weight. It's the emotional power of the first theme that cannot be contained and finds its way back into the recapitulation. The movement ends with quite an extensive coda, and as he did in his first symphony actually, Schumann here anticipates the second movement in the coda of the first movement. And this coda is marked by contrasting moments, especially in the dynamic level, going from a forte to an immediate piano. The horns and trumpets take the lead, and the heroic opening character closes the movement. Although I've heard it more than once, there is no chaturanga in the last 15 bars. It's easy to fall into the temptation of making one, but it would take away the weight of the entire movement. This is a fantastic piece to conduct, and it's quite difficult to find the right tempo, not too fast so that it doesn't sound rushed, and not too slow so that it doesn't drag. And although this could be said for a lot of music, I find it particularly challenging in this piece, but when it works, it actually is also particularly rewarding. So thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel and ring the bell so that you will get notified when a new video comes out by clicking on the subscribe button below the video. And now I have a question for you. If you had to pick an adjective for the first theme and one for the second theme, which one would it be? Let me know in the comments below, and I will see you next week for another episode of Conducting Pills, which will be centered around Mozart's Symphony No. 40. Till then, bye-bye. Schumann, on the other hand, took the horn by the bulls. Took the bull by the horns. By clicking on the link, on the button, in the button, in the button. Just click the button.